Yeah. Blah. What is going on? What's going on? Welcome to the second episode of the Shango Unchained podcast. Come on in, make yourself comfortable. Our guest will be with us shortly today. We have the one and only Brother Baniti joining the show. Okay. And we're going to be discussing, talking about, chopping it up, conversing about a very important topic. It's a critical topic, actually. I see somebody actually put a question in the chat already ahead of time. Hallelujah. God bless you. Glamorous butterfly. Hashatabasoto. All right. And we're going to get to that. That's actually one of my first questions, believe it or not. But this particular episode is also brought to you by the Master Your Magic workshop coming up this Saturday, March 25th, 2023. And this is the workshop that is going to show you, okay, and if not install, simple, key, fundamental things or perceptions, you can even say, too, that you can apply to your magic, any magic. Doesn't matter what type of magic. This is not a class on specific tools and tactics, although we may get into some of that at the end of the class or the workshop. But this is about really integrating how to get your magic to work for you reliably. Okay. You don't have to trip out. You don't have to bug out. It doesn't have to be a stressful thing. That's what I'm saying to you. Okay. I can prove it to you. As a matter of fact, better than that, you can prove it to yourself. So I forgot to put the link in this show. Maybe it's in the description box. I'm not sure, but let me give a little background here as far as, how I came across this brother's work. So as many of you know, and some of you don't, a lot of you don't, I'd say last year was, especially going into last year, was a very dark time for me. Everything was crumbling, as I have explained before. I've kind of told the story, but I'll just briefly go over it because it has something to do with how I began to work with my the next guest that's coming in here, Brother Baniti. Like I said, it was a hell of a time. It was a hell of a time. Okay. Turns out I was at the end of a major life cycle. Okay. So death was all around me. Death was all around me. Okay. Literally, figuratively, metaphorically, you name it, it was around me. Okay. And thank God I had kind of been through similar dark nights of the soul in the past. So it wasn't so foreign, but as those of you who know, each one is different. Each one is its own thing. So one of the things that came to my mind was, you know what? I'm going to double down on my shadow work. It's time for me to double down. Now that I have this time to myself, I'm going to take full advantage of it. And I happen to, quote unquote, run across this brother's information as far as his, he has a shadow work class that I took, and I'm actually going to take it again. I'm going to start over and I'm going to take it again. But I took it for a large part of last year. And I got to tell you, man, there was so many ahas and epiphanies for me. Of course, in this class, you have to do your homework. You got to do your work, and I think that just goes for any and everything. You have to do your work. Okay. The greatest work that you have is you. It's yourself, and that's why I'm very excited to be able to, share this information with you. Why I want to share this information with you. In that Master Your Magic workshop, I just briefly touch on shadow work because it is an important part of your magic. It is critical to your magic, right? But I said briefly touch on it because what I'm going to be doing in the workshop and what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be, recommending that you check out this brother's class because why reinvent the wheel? I'm not a master at shadow work, but I am, I have made quantum leaps and strides in my own work with myself. And that's the point, that's the point. Let me see here with the comment section. Bon, yeah. So, you know, but through this shadow work class, some of the things obviously I've heard about before, right? And then others he's been able to mix his own creativity in that process. So in this conversation, we're going to get into a lot of these because there's a lot of confusion about shadow work. Let's just face it. You hear so much. There's so many differences in definition, and I understand that it's going to vary from person to person. Okay, but if you look at your subconscious mind as this huge closet, this storehouse that you have, right? Every emotion that you've ever felt, every experience that you ever went through is in there, alive and well. Now, whether you're aware of it or not is a whole other thing. And I'm just going to kind of briefly just share some of my brief insights before he gets here, as far as what really came to me about shadow work. So a lot of times we want to just simply eradicate those things that we don't like about ourselves, or especially, those behaviors, things like that. And we don't understand why we do them in the first place. And that's a crucial step, is also getting to know yourself. Like, why do you do that shit? Do you know? And a lot of times you can spatter off an ego answer or a conscious answer of what you think. But when you start to do the shadow work, the process takes you somewhere. That's the thing about it. This is not, we like to micromanage and ego control everything, but there comes a point where you have to surrender to the process and let the process teach you, let the process show you, because it wants to show you. You know what I'm saying? So, that's one of the major things. A lot of people have a hard time with that. A lot of people have a hard time. They're afraid of losing control, and I get it. I understand. But when you start to make friends with these aspects of yourself that you may have forgot about, right? I've also heard some people speak of, because, sometimes your identity can get fractured, right? Especially through trauma. And there can either, I don't know if you can, the way they explain it is you can lose pieces of yourself. I don't know where you're going to lose it to, because really, truthfully, if you're the all in all, then where's it going to go? If there is nowhere but here and now, and, we are all fractals of the divine, and really, truthfully, all there is the divine, and I don't know where it's going to go, right? But I know that it can transform, right? And what used to bind you now can push you, can propel you, can fuel you, so there's a lot to this. There's a whole lot to this, and I can't wait to get into this. And like I said, I mean, this brother, he's I'm gonna just give a very brief, because I don't know his whole get down, like his quote unquote spiritual resume, but I know that his path has led him through a lot of different organizations, and that's a lot of experience, such as he is a bona fide Freemason, legit, not talking about like this YouTube shit. He is initiated in Palo Mayombe, legit, all right? Because there's a lot of this scammery. I'm not talking, this brother came up at a time when, we did shit nose to nose, toes to toes. There was none of this, so especially if you was trying to gain spiritual knowledge, you would be going to different organizations. He's also a member of the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. And if I'm not mistaken, he can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but he is also a member of the OTO. Those of you who know about the OTO, as well as what's a Rosicrucians. I don't know if those are the same thing. That just shows you, like, I don't know about all these, but he's traveled a lot. Let's put it that way. In real life now, we have this internet, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing, and you got to take advantage of it, but you also have to be very discerning about the information. Of course, take what you can use for now. You might not be able to use certain shit right now, but just take what you can use for now. You know what I'm saying? And, maybe revisit the rest or whatever have you. Okay. Let's check the chat here real fast. See, Glamorous Butterfly, she's ahead of her time. I like that. Are you a Libra? She says, hi, what's shadow work? Everyone speaks of it, but I don't know what it is. Well, settle back. Okay, because you in for a real treat. We're definitely going to touch on that. And we're going to get right into that as soon as the guest arrives. Vaughn, the devotee, what's going on? V Nice, hola from LA, California. Welcome, everybody. We're still kind of letting people in. So, yeah, I mean, it goes deep. It goes deep. And a lot of times, especially and this is more on a mundane level, right? So if you're having problems manifesting something that you want, right? Shadow work is the tool that's going to help you to clear it up. Not just so you can get what you want, because the story is so much bigger than just getting what you want. You know what I'm saying? Who you become and what you find out about yourself, your relationship with yourself. I know it sounds cliche. Nobody wants to hear that. They just want the result of whatever they're going for right now. I get that, but after a while, when you start accruing results, you're going to find that it's not just about these individual intentions. It really is about who you are being right now. You know what I'm saying? And that's where the real treasure's at. That's where the real treasure's at. TD, what's going on? Welcome. Come on, settle on in. Yeah, so that's what we're like I said, we're just waiting on the guest right now. He got caught up in traffic. He's in Florida, I believe. And he also has a lot of other he's got a really good Patreon. I ain't even gonna front. He's got a fire ass Patreon. He's got like group rituals in there, lots of classes about lots of different things, like different occult related subjects. Obviously, we stay around the occult here. So what's going on, Piffy? How did that trip go yesterday? So yeah, it's really imperative that if you want to move forward, yes, shadow work is a part of healing, and shadow work can get messy at times. I've seen a lot of fuckery ass information by fake ass people on here about shadow work, and that's kind of also what makes it more difficult and harder. Let me not say, well, yeah, everyone has their own definition. They have a right to their own definition, and I get it. And to me, it's about, whose definition kind of aligns with your definition. And if you don't know, finding out. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. So I'm glad to hear it, Piff. I'm glad to hear it. So yeah, but it is, like I said, it is imperative. It is hard. In any form of shadow work that you do, it has you go to those places about yourself that you just don't like. That's like a baseline type of thing when it comes to shadow work, because that's why it's in your shadow, because you blocked it out. You know what I'm saying? You tried to stuff it away. You put it somewhere, and it's uncomfortable. And sometimes these aspects, they want to creep back out, right? And as they're creeping back out, you may experience a feeling of anxiety, like restlessness, and you don't know why. So a lot of times people will like do something to they'll try and fuck it away, drink it away, smoke it away, eat it away, scroll it away, and it's not going to go anywhere is my point. It's not going to go anywhere. But, it just goes to show you that at some point in time, just like in the movies, when the demon keeps chasing the person and they finally stop running and turn around and they face it. You know what I'm saying? There is immense power in that. Yeah, but the way I like to explain it is instead of facing it, it's kind of like you open your arms up. It's like, hey, come give me a hug, you know? So now I don't want to make it overly simplistic because sometimes we have to transform things by deconstructing it, by destroying it, so it can take on another form, you know? So there's a lot to this. And so, like I said, if you're just tuning in, we are awaiting Brother Baniti. He should be popping in here any time now. He got caught up in traffic and he sent me a message. So he is on the way. He's definitely on the way. And we are going to be discussing shadow work. It's one of my favorite subjects and it's one of my least favorite subjects, you know, at different times. Because sometimes it can get, like I said, very intense. And other times it's very joyful. You know, what's in your shadow is not just bad stuff. Let's demystify it. It's not just a negative thing. It's not just, or it doesn't have just intense, dark connotations. There's a lot of great and loving things also in your shadow. You know, so I'm not even sure who came up with the whole concept of shadow work, or as far as calling it a shadow. I think it was Carl Jung, but I could be wrong on that, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be misquoted here. So, yeah, but so, like I said, it comes down. You actually gain power from that, believe it or not. When you are able to allow something, because when you don't, right? Think about it. It's just like anything else that you suppress. A lot of times people want to suppress their emotions. And what happens? That emotion ends up coming out in some form or fashion, right? It can come out in the form of really fucked up relationships, or a string or a chain of fucked up relationships. It can come out as, you know, physical illness. Okay. Physical illness is a big one. It comes out usually. And when we talk about suppressed, the reason it's very tricky is because a lot of times you don't know that you don't know. You know, your subconscious mind has kind of cut that off from you, or it tries to protect you from whatever that particular trauma was. So in essence, it tries to make it to where it's like you forget about it. The thing about it is it's still alive. There's that old saying, feelings buried alive never die. And that's true. And I know a lot of people, we all like to post our deep memes and things of that nature. And I'm sure that, you know, that's cool and stuff like that. But to actually live that, experience it, and do it is a whole other thing. You know, it's a whole other thing. And you will find yourself being swept away into the river of transformation, into the chasm, into the abyss. And sometimes when you get to that edge, that cliff, you just got to jump. You know, yes, it's scary, but trust, when you come out the other side of that, you know, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. You know, for oftentimes we come to the edge and we say, no, not today. I don't think so. So, you know, but there's only one thing to do. You got to jump. You got to jump. You got to jump, you know, and some people, it may take years to get up to that. I've often wondered, where would I be had I started my shadow work 10 years ago, you know, 15 years ago? But, you know, you get where you get when you get where you get. And sometimes, I mean, there's probably some type of divine timing to that. I don't understand. It's just like ahas and epiphanies, no pun intended. But do you ever wonder why you have a certain aha or epiphany when you do? And it's like you didn't have it a second sooner or later. You had it exactly when you had it. And it's like, why didn't this come to me like last week or last month or last year, you know? But everything has its own timing. For those of you just turning in, we are still awaiting Brother Baniti. He's like I said, he got caught up in some traffic here. So yeah. But while we're doing that, I want to just invite, get relaxed. I'm telling you, you're going to also have a chance to ask some questions. I don't know exactly how much time this brother has, but while you're waiting, check this out. Whether you know it or not, your life is just like a movie. And you're the writer, you're the director, and you're also the star. The question is, number one, are you a sub-character in your own movie, or are you the main star? What part of the movie is your character in right now? Is it at the beginning part of the movie where the character may be getting their ass whooped by the ebbs and flows of life? Is it in a slow part of the movie where things are dull and stale? Well, now's your chance to step up to your power. Just like every character does, there's a turning point in every movie, which is what makes the movie good. Or else it'd be boring if the character just suffered from beginning to end until the credits roll, don't you think? The Master Your Magic workshop is going to show you, it's going to give you the keys, the small, subtle, fundamental keys that are simple to totally take your magic game to the next level, to set all your ritual and spell work ablaze with success. No matter, like I said, if you're a beginner, whether you're adept or whether you're a master, because nobody knows everything. And it only takes one jewel to change the trajectory and to change your magic game. So if you want to take things to the next level in the simplest, most practical way, let me say that, we're going to demystify a lot of different assumptions you may have about sorcery and your very own ability to manifest, which is what is blocking your ability to manifest in the way that you want, in a more concise way, in a more consistent way. Am I right? So take the time, join the Master Your Magic workshop. It's the first of its kind, available now. And also, when you do, and if you're able, if you're one of the quick ones, one of the smart ones, you'll also be able to get into our spring equinox wealth. It off right there because the spring equinox is done, and it was a fantabulous ritual. I did two separate well, it wasn't actually separate, but the point was to be able to do it, the ritual, perform it with you in real time. And so we had two specific times. So if you couldn't make one time, you can catch the other time. But yeah, it was awesome. We're planting major seeds. What's going on, Quinetha Watson? Yeah. So we're just still, like I said, I'm still waiting on Brother Baniti. Like I said, he had messaged me. He was late in traffic. So we're just talking about shadow work. Okay. You know what? Go ahead and why don't you guys, those of you in the chat, if you can, let me know what your definition. I'm curious as to what your definition of shadow work is. Let me know what your definition of shadow work is in the chat, because I'm curious, and I guess you can't really say there's a right or wrong, but there definitely is what's effective. There's definitely what's effective. And there's certain things that you should gauge your shadow work by, So go ahead, twiddle fingers, get up in there in that chat. Let me know what you think shadow work is. Share your definition. Because we're all about sharing here. You know what I'm saying? Sharing is caring. Sharing is caring. As we await our special guest, Brother Baniti, like I said, we're going to be getting into this shadow work business. Indubitably. Okay. So let me know. I don't see the chat moving. Y'all must be driving. All of you driving at once. There we go. Okay. Tessa asks, is it dealing with our shadow as it is manifesting before us? I've been wondering. That's a good question. I like that question. Digging in deep, dealing with the parts of you that you don't care for. Shoulder shrug. I mean, yeah, essentially that is a lot to do with it. Absolutely. So look, I'm going to go, let's pull up Tessa here. And her little bun. And put her bun on the wall of fame. All right. So she asked, is it dealing with our shadow as it is manifesting before us? And I like this question because I know a lot of people, it's like and I used to do this, right? I guess you could say it's kind of a form of shadow work, but when there was no problems, I would want to go. For some reason, I thought it was a good idea, to go hunting for limiting beliefs, right? And one thing that I learned in this brother's class is the time to deal with some shit is when it's popping up, So I would concur as far as with your question. Is it dealing with our shadow as it is manifesting before us? I think that is the prime time to deal with it. In many ways, it's like, I don't know those of you who have dealt with children or very young children, but when you are disciplining or correcting them, you have to do it when the infraction occurs. You can't wait till later on in the evening, because more than likely they're not going to really remember what you're talking about, So if you want it to be effective, yes, I would say deal with things as they come up, or at the very least, if you notice something coming up, mark that shit. Mark it, because you're going to want to come back to that. You're going to want to revisit it. Let's just say something comes up at work, and obviously you can't do shadow work at work, maybe, right? So, but you definitely write it down, or you do something so that way you can get to it. You know what I'm saying? When you need to. Our very own Deaconess Smacky, her definition is finding what we repress and dealing with it. Yeah, I would say that that is a nut. Yeah, definitely. That goes with it. Let's see what old Pippy's Place says. She says, working with our unconscious mind to uncover the parts of yourself that have been buried. Yeah. So in a way, you can kind of look at it like you're a grave digger. But the difference is the dead rise, right? Don't they? The dead rise. Even if they haven't rose in a long time. Okay. Even if they haven't risen, I think that's the word. If they haven't risen in a long time, you'll find out. You'll find out in the next relationship, or later on down the line in your relationship, when it takes another turn or into another dynamic that you weren't prepared for. That's when you get to find out, And this, the funny thing about this whole shadow work thing. The funny thing about the shadow work thing, Brother Baniti is here. So you know what? Let's take this moment. I want to welcome this brother. Like I said, I'm excited about sharing this information, and I also wanted to show my support for him and his work, because I experienced the work. So let's get to it, ladies and gentlemen. Brother Baniti from Primordial Chaos. What's going on, brother?
What's going on, man? Hey, I'm sorry I'm late, man. Sorry.
It's good. It's good. That's good. Hey, I'm a professional. What is the word for being late all the time? But yeah,
fashionably late.
Yeah,
I don't know about fashionably, but I'm late.
Yeah, well, if you're gonna be late, you might as well make it fashionable, though, right? You know what I'm saying? Shit. So,
cool.
How you been, brother?
No, everything's good, man. How you been? I know it's been a minute since we talked.
Yes, absolutely. I've been great, man. I've been great, and I've been telling them about.
Man. I see you.
Yeah, we trying to step it up a little. I told you I was gonna come back. One of the things he told me was, "Hey, take your time, but don't take too long."
That's it.
All right.
100%.
So, could you just give a little? I gave a brief, just little tidbit of your background, but just can you just briefly touch on the organizations that your path has led you through?
Sure. Well, to start out, I'll give you the quick, I'll give you the thorough but quick summarization. So I was actually born and raised Catholic. I started out with Catholicism. Didn't grow up in a super strict household. My mother was more Catholic than my father. My father was one of those Christmas, Easter Catholics. You go 2-3 times a year because my mother forced them. Speed it up. Long story short, when I probably hit about 13, 14 years old is when I started to realize there's got to be more stuff out there. The religion thing started to wear really thin. Now, though, as a child, I was attracted to the ritualistic aspects of the Mass. I know this might sound a little weird, but, I used to love the smell of the rock incense, and I used to love
frankincense.
The Gregorian chanting. And just when I came up, they were still doing it. It was, I grew up as a kid. They were still doing. It was the end of Vatican I, going into Vatican II, so they were still doing the Mass in Latin. Then, as you know, Pope John Paul II came, that all changed. But anyway, speed it up. So I started exploring. And then I got my first introduction to consciousness was the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths. That took me to a whole nother realm. And that was probably around the mid to early 80s. And then it led me to the movement of the Nuwapians and Dr. York for a while.
I forgot about that one. That's right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I was in that for a long time. I was actually close with York. I'm not going to get too much into that, but once I started working on his case, I started to uncover some things that didn't sit right with me. So I voluntarily left on my own. I hold no bitterness. But I do stand the position that the man is guilty and he did molest those children. I know there's a big, thing on and off about that over the years, but without dwelling on that and diverting from the subject. So I was in that for a while. And while I was in that, in 1998 was probably when I first started dabbling in an occult. Now, because at that time I was into more conscious movements, mainstream conscious movements, we kind of kept that shit on the DL.
Yeah.
So I was dabbling in candle magic, and then I got introduced to Santeria, and I met my godmother. I'm going to say it was late 99, going into early 2000. And there was a period in the very late 90s, early 2000s. I was heavily submerged in Santeria / Ifa. I was initiated in that. Received my Elekes, my warriors, crowned Oshun, got into Palo Mayembe because my godmother's brother, he's a Palero, and it was weird because he didn't practice Santeria or Ifa. He was strictly Palo Mayembe. So I stayed in that for several years.
Palos, yeah.
Yeah. And then I started branching out into Freemasonry, and then about 2011, I joined the Rosicrucian Order. Right now, I'm still active. I don't go all the time like I did. I stopped that years ago, but I am a 12th degree Rosicrucian. I went through the Masonic Lodge. I went through the Shriner Lodge. I went through the first 4 degrees of the Order Templi Orientis, OTO. So I was exploring, and then probably around, and I'm just giving you the fast synopsis, probably around 2000, I'm going to say 13, I came across the Temple of Set. So that was when I started shifting more towards more darker occultic things. Even though I was into the occult, this is probably when I started to really explore more the left-hand path about 9-10 years ago. The Temple is Set. Long story short, there was some politics in that. I stayed in that, was raised, up to a priest, left the order, voluntarily resigned, believe it or not, because of my YouTube channel. It's funny how some of these organizations say, explore yourself, become the God you're destined to be.
But then it's an organization, so it's like an oxymoron. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
So I resigned. I refused to let anybody tell me what I can and cannot do. So I was like, fuck that. That's a wrap. We ain't doing that. Which leads me to kind of where I'm at now. I am a high priest in the Temple of the Ascendant Flame. So one of my main paths now is the Draconian current. I'm working with that aspect, not just that, but that's one of my main paths. And that's kind of how I got to where I'm at today. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened in between.
Of course, yeah.
I'm just trying to give you the brief history. So started in Catholicism.
Right.
This is where we at now.
Wow, what a trip. That is shit. Yeah. But I was explaining to them too. I don't know if you was able to catch that, but this is like, and I have to remind them, this is back in the days when, I mean, we do shit nose to nose, toes to toes. It wasn't this internet shit. So there's a lot of blessings with the internet shit, but there's a lot of curses with this shit. Correct. You know what I'm saying? So the name of the show is Shadow Work and Sorcery. And I actually titled this show because you actually said that one time, I believe, or something very similar to that. I may have got it wrong, but it really stuck out to me. Okay. So first and foremost, I'd like to ask you, what is your personal definition of shadow work? Right.
And you're right. It's very important to understand. Well, first, I always encourage everybody, whatever type of spiritual system it is, always look into multiple facets of it. Mm-hmm. So whether it could be Luciferian practice, it could be Ifa, Apollo, and in this case, shadow work. So we have to understand the shadow work that I talk about or teach is probably a little bit, when I say darker, and I hate that word, I got to be careful how I say that. It's more intense because we don't cut no corners. There's no fillers. There is more of that also new age, lighter, fluffy type of shadow work. So we have to understand, we have to be able to discern the difference between the two. They do serve their purpose, but my definition of shadow work is when you're uncovering the shadow or the hidden self, it's every aspect of yourself that you're not fully conscious or aware of. And that's not just bad things, it's good things too.
Mm-hmm.
But the painful or the intense parts of the darker aspects of shadow work is when you're dealing with emotional, psychological, and mental traumas that you might have picked up along the way in your life's journey. That could be physical, mental, or verbal abuse, sexual abuse from individuals, family members, or others. That's part of the trauma that I'm talking about. It could be uncovering certain characteristics, habits, or personality traits that you may or may not realize that you have, that you need to work on, that could be hindering you from growing. It could be lack of understanding of your ego. And one thing I teach with shadow work, a lot of paths or what I like to refer to as right-hand path philosophies, they always refer to, the ego, it's 100% bad, suppress it, sweep it under the rug. That's not true. Your ego also protects you, right? Anytime you resort to speaking out against something you feel is an injustice, that's your ego protecting you. Now, there's a fine line between the ego, arrogance, and confidence, and sometimes people mistake the two. But I show people the bad side of your ego is then you have sometimes somebody who's 100% wrong. And even though you're smacking them upside the head with proof, he or she will still continue to debate and argue with you. That's a weak side of your ego. So shadow work too, my definition in there is understanding the proper functioning too of your ego. It's not all bad, but there are weak aspects of your ego that can be destructive. So it's about uncovering all aspects of the hidden self, good and bad, and then working on your weaknesses and turning them into strengths. That would be the short, straight to the point definition. But obviously, as you know, there's a lot more in between those lines.
Yeah. We're going to get into some of those gray areas, as we like to say also too. Okay, well, in your, what have you noticed are some misconceptions? We kind of touched on what it is. Mm-hmm. What is it not, in your opinion?
Okay, what it is not, there's a saying you have to be careful with. You'll hear this inner child thing. I think sometimes there's this illusionary veil that it just deals with this pure, undefiled innocence. And there is the aspect of the inner child, but I've also found out the inner child can be very damaged too. What it's not is also you'll see, and again, as I referred to lighter systems, and I guess we can say, you'll see shadow work mentioned in a lot of new age movements or new age type of, I'm trying to use a term that people can connect with, that one would label very new agey. What it isn't is, I don't want nobody to be under the misconception that it's like just getting in tune with, the mother goddess and nature, and there's this just very light and love aspect to it. Not that that's not there to a degree. I want to make people understand it's not all, sunshines and rainbows, as they say. It's not all pleasant. So if I had to say what it's not in a nutshell, it's just like working with the Kundalini energy. People, you have to be prepared. Not all of it is pleasant. That's what it's not.
That's real. Yeah. Yep. Especially as it starts to rise and goes through them blockages or whatever you may have in your energetic system, like you're going to feel it. And in your body, of course. Yeah. Correct. I see. Okay. So one thing that you definitely said that blew my mind, and I've probably heard it before, Brother B, but I don't know, for some reason, you know how this time and shit works. Yes. When you hear something at the right time, it's just like, boom.
Correct.
Can you talk on something I feel is very important, the difference between wants and needs, and especially as it relates to shadow work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. But what you just described before, that feeling that you described, like hearing something, I call that a DNA explosion, right? When your DNA explodes like that and you get this feeling of awareness, or some might even refer to it as an aha moment, but it even goes deeper. We refer to it on the path of the occult, or the left-hand path, what we call in Egyptian Heka, Khepera or Kephera. coming into the realization of who and what you really are, having that moment. It's a moment of awareness. Wants and needs. I just wanted to add that because it came to mind. Said that.
Hey, flow with it.
Yeah, man. Wants and needs is usually the critical make or break factor in somebody being successful with shadow work, but really across the board on this path in general. Any type of spiritual path. Why? Because I find out over the years, and I myself years back was guilty of this. Most people start their ritual work and even shadow work with focusing on needs more than they do wants. Now, where shadow work comes in to establish that understanding, your shadow work will determine what are wants and needs. And through your shadow work, you start to come to the realization, look, I spend a lot of my life and my time chasing wants and not needs. So we do exercises, for an example, in the shadow work class that I do on my Patreon page. I show people how to make a list of goals that they're trying to accomplish. And in that list, after you write it out, make one big list and then go through it in depth and in detail and be honest. Say, is this something that's an absolute necessity at the moment? If it's not, put it into the category as a want. Because I teach people, once you take care of the needs first, the wants automatically come. So for an example, just so we're clear and your listeners can understand, sometimes you have people who are doing ritual work or magic work. They might want money, finances, a nice car, a house, which that's great. Everybody should obtain for living their best life. But they might get frustrated because for some reason it's just not happening. But they negate the fact that sometimes the spirits don't work like that because there's something bigger that's needed that they're ignoring. So maybe they haven't addressed a lot of psychological traumas they've been through. That needs to be addressed first. Maybe they've got emotional issues that they haven't addressed yet. Maybe there's other personal problems or matters that need to be cleared up first that could be obstructing their spiritual paths to prosperity or success. And they find that by not taking care of that need first, I even see this like people who come on the path and they want to start working with intense gods or goddesses or demons or spirits of a darker nature like Lilith, Azazel, Lucifer, but yet they've got mental issues they haven't addressed. That could be a dynamite.
Oh, that's a big one. That is a big one right there.
It's a big one. So essentially, the importance in a nutshell, as you bring up, and it's a great question, wants and needs, every practitioner needs, and that's what shadow work does. It helps you do a deep analyzation of your entire life. And through doing certain rituals and exercises in shadow work, the awareness comes to the surface of what needs to be addressed. Right. And once you have the awareness, now you're able to decipher, wait, this is more important. I need to take care of this. I need to work on this. I can work on the BMW later. You know what I'm saying?
And I like how you said, not to cut you off, brother. How you said it arises, because you may not know that you don't even know what it is, or you can think you know what it is from here, but you wrong. You got to let it show you, like you said, let it arise. It will come out. You know what I'm saying? And I'm glad you said that about making that list, because that was going to be my sub question, like how do you identify needs? But it does take a lot of honesty, does it not? You know,
correct. And I'm glad you said that. And it's tough honesty. That's where when we were talking about just a few minutes ago, that's where sometimes the pleasant stuff comes in. You have to sometimes, when it comes to things like this, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Because the reality is shadow work will make you come to the realization some of the messed up shit you've been doing, or how you've been focusing your time and energy in the wrong areas. And sometimes it could be a tough pill to swallow. Sometimes you come to the reality. Maybe you've been doing a certain practice or a certain thing for so long, and because you were doing it for so long, you convinced yourself that this is what you should be doing. And sometimes your shadow work says, no, you're wasting your time. That's not productive for you right now. You need to focus your interest, your energy, and your area in another direction. So it goes into all those facets of your life. There's nothing it's not going to touch or unturn. I think the challenge for the practitioner that is doing the shadow work, As long, I always say this, you probably heard me say this in many of my videos over the years, you always have to be ready and prepared to embrace the change. And that's the one thing. It's about change. And some people handle it well. They can work in accordance with change, but then there's others who, I'll be honest with you, they struggle. It's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So needs and wants. If you put them in that perspective, I think people will see you'll get better results in your work.
There is definitely a pecking order, sir. You know what I'm saying? There's definitely a pecking order. 100%. And I'm glad you just said that too, because another thing that you had said on the class that I had actually never really heard before, to be honest, was how important results are. In other words, your shadow work should be yielding results.
That's correct.
Could you expound on that?
No, excellent question. I tell people across the board, especially with shadow work, well, one thing, when you're dealing with the occult or the left-hand path or some system of spiritual sovereignty and liberation, I know we like to always use the term we're gods and goddesses. And with that is we have to take responsibility for our actions, where we have to be able to take control and seize our destiny. And with doing that, it comes a responsibility. So when we're talking about anything in relation to taking control of our actions, right? Or taking that responsibility of deityship, a lot of people don't want to do that because it could be burdensome. It could be very wear on you because I always ask people, and because you bring that up, not to get diverted, it ties into this because I always like to ask people. So for an example, what is the definition of being a god or a goddess to you? And I ask that because I don't want to look for a generic answer, something you've read in a book. I want to hear it from the individual in their own words, their own mouth. And to me, it's not anything spooky. It's you're making a declaration that I'm taking responsibility and control for my life. Anyway, I didn't mean to get diverted, but what was the original?
No, that's actually really important. But because when you was touching on the results, though, like along the way, obviously there's going to be many results from your shadow work, but you got to have it's a process, yet you also have to be able to quantify it, correct? Like there has to be some markers that I'm going in the right direction.
Right. So if you're not getting results, whether it's shadow work, ritual work across the board, I always tell people it's about the results, period. Don't get caught up in the method, the technique, because I find people second guess themselves. Like, for an example, I've always said this when it comes to results. People will send me an email. Hey, I did this work. I did this exercise, this ritual. And then they'll follow it up with something really great that they got these results, this and that. And then this is where I get confused. Then they'll say, but I'm wondering if I did it right.
I get that all the time, bro. Like, I was like, what the fuck?
No.
Do you think I should? Do you think it's not what I think, yo? Like, did it work?
So that's number one. You always gauge your success by your results, regardless if it's not in alignment with something mainstream or you read in a book or something that you feel in your mind you need to validate it by. But your results is the critical gauge or measuring tool. So for an example, if you're doing shadow work, you're doing rituals, you're doing exercises, you're studying, you're researching, and you're not getting results, then we have to look and probe deeper. There's something not right there. Now, it could be because they could be mental and emotional and psychological traumas that haven't been addressed because people fail to realize how much that affects you, not just on a conscious level, but
we're going to get to that. I got one lined up for you on that one too. But I find another one too is also you could actually have a hidden want, or your subconscious mind can want one thing because it thinks by keeping that away from you, what you consciously want, it's protecting you in some way, So there's a lot of different layers and levels to that. So I'm glad you brought that up because for those of us who are on the occult path, and I've spoke with thousands of women and for all types of reasons, right?
Sure.
But one thing that I've noticed that has broken my heart over the years is how much sexual trauma, that a lot of women have went through. Could you speak on the impact of or shadow work as it relates to the sexual trauma, like specifically,
Yes.
and your apotheosis, your self-deification, your occult power? Like, how are these intertwined? And
I'm glad you asked that, because now I want to answer this in full, because one, I have to make this statement before I say what I say. Me, myself, I was never sexually abused or experienced any of that. I have to say that because I want to make sure I'm saying this from a perspective in dealing with people. So I don't want to say I'm an expert on that, because if that's never happened to you, you fully don't understand the spectrum of it, right?
correct. Yeah.
So I want to put that out there. I don't want to, I don't want to give misinformation. But what's blown me away in the last 15 to 20 years, it is more so females, but males too. And this is crazy. And you might experience this too in your work with clients. I can tell you this, it almost seems 1 out of every 3 people have been abused on that level. It's fucking crazy. The numbers are staggering, and it's usually by a direct family member. I'm not saying all the time, but it's usually by a close friend of the family or a direct family member. So this is something that is it runs rampant, and it's been going on for years. Now, how it can affect you, and again, I can only say this in my experience researching it, and I can only say this in dealing with clients.
Right.
It can affect you on a sexual level, where one, it can make you either oversex, where you have no control of your sexual desires or energy, or it can make a person just completely turn the other way, where they have no interest or desire for sex. It can ruin intimacy, on a wide scale level, where they can never have a healthy or productive relationship. It could psychologically make that person almost accept abuse as the norm. Now, I've seen it be a little different for men. With men, it's more of a shameful thing, is the best way I can describe it. It's not, and look, not saying it makes it easier for a woman, but it seems like when it's a male, in my experience working with clients, there's this very shame thing, that this embarrassment to talk about it. And the sad thing is, when it's happened to somebody who is a child, and most of these people or these clients I deal with, this happened when they were young children, which is more fucked up.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that's, when it starts at a young age, right? The reality is, it's about being able to put it into its perspective in order for you to have a healthy spiritual life, because how it can cause problems and obstructions is, bottom line is, sometimes what happens is the individual never has, forgiven themselves and saying that it wasn't their fault.
That's a huge one right there. Yeah.
Especially if you were a young child. That's not your fault. I mean, first of all, this is my stance on it. I don't give a fuck, and I have no qualm in saying this. I don't believe, I have no mercy or sympathy for any grown adult that can look at a fucking young child in a sexual manner. If it was up to me, I don't give a fuck. I'm passionate about it. I'd line them all up against the wall and shoot them.
Yeah.
That's just me. Okay. And I have no qualms in saying that. And I take a firm position on it, because I don't just say that because I got children, right? Just the thought of it alone it's unbelievable how
it's unfathomable. And it's one of those things that I don't know if can be fixed. It's almost like it's like perhaps only a bullet can do that. You know what I'm saying? Because I haven't known it to be fixed. Put it that way. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Look, I don't think it could ever be fixed. It can only be contained. I just don't think a person that has that illness that can be cured. I don't believe all the therapy in the world isn't going to do anything to the point of where I don't think a person can be fully resolved from it. Now, you take it with a grain of salt. The problem is, in this world and in life, people always want to be liberal about everything. Look, you got to take a stance on certain things. That's just just me speaking personally. Yeah. Right. I don't like fence straddlers. Take a position on something, period. Not everybody's going to like your position. That's okay. But I'll be damned if you let people suppress how your position is. But back to your original question, without getting sidetracked, in shadow work, that is probably one of the most painful, intense darkest aspects. And as you said, that asking that question, I got people in my shadow work class now, probably 65 to 70% of them are working on that. Literally almost 70% of people in my shadow work class have dealt with some type of sexual abuse. And that's how fucked up it is, literally.
And it is one of them things that just keeps going, like, especially in your childhood, if your blueprint gets imprinted with that shit,
correct.
It just keeps perpetuating after
Exactly.
that in some form or fashion. So, yeah.
Right.
So
that's a good question.
Yeah. Okay. So another one, as far as, as far as dealing with like one's occult power, right? And I know it's not just about occult power. The bottom line is, like we've, talked about before, it's like self-deification, self-actualization, whatever you want to call it, right? Self-mastery. Could you touch on shadow work and everyone's favorite topic, deprogramming from religious bullshit, the curse of religious indoctrination?
Listen, you just hit the nail straight on the head. This is probably right up there at the top, the number one reason or the make or break reason why people are successful or fail on this path. And we focus on that particular aspect you just described. It's constant, because what tends to happen is a lot of people will come on this path, any path of liberation, like you said, self-apotheosis. And I like to refer to this path as self-mastery because it includes a multitude of different systems.
Right.
So let's refer to it as that. I've said in previous video, I don't even like to use the word, left-hand path, because that sometimes just gets affiliated with Eurocentric philosophies. And that kind of bothers me sometimes, because the left-hand path really is not just limited to that. But in regards to religious deprogramming, it's people will come on this path and still have not addressed the effects of, especially a person. Now, this doesn't apply to everybody, but I see this a pattern in people who were raised in strict religious households. But let's just say, give you an example. I can use an example of somebody I know that, say, like came up in like a Southern Baptist, one of those very, very conservative, strict type of forms of Christianity. There's different branches of it, so the programming is different. Like, for an example, as I said, I was raised Catholic. It seemed to be a little easier because Catholicism is more ritualistic. It's not really into all that modern day Reformed Christianity. But I find people like non-denominational Baptists, Jehovah Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists.
I was going to say Seventh-day Adventists. You're like,
the programming is deep, because it seems like a lot of people that come from those religious schools of thought, there's almost this guilt, shame thing that they have not shed themselves of, right? Because they never phantomed that they would come across a path. So they struggle with, they understand the path of self-mastery and everything that you have the ability to obtain, but it's just the spell and the hold that religion have on. Then on this side, they're feeling guilt and a little bit of remorse and fear, a little bit of doubt there, and fear. Exactly. So they're wrestling with both of this. There's just this wonderful opportunity here on the path of self-mastery, and then they're being pulled. Well, I was a Baptist my whole life. My mother was raised a Baptist, my grandparents, this and that, and they're struggling with the reality. Now, I tell people, this is critical. You can never fully receive the blessings of this path until you let go of all the old paradigms, the old ways of thinking, the old dogmas, because they will hold you back. So there's many ways to address that. Like, let me give you an example. So if you were born and raised Catholic, and I've done this with many clients, I tell them, if it was in the church, if you were a Muslim, if you were Jew, take the central ritual. And in this case, I'll use Catholicism because the Catholic Mass is the central ritual of the Catholic Church. I say, take the central ritual that is the most important or foundational spiritual practice of the system you came from, and rewrite it in its own format and reenact your own ritual. Yep. So one thing I did years ago was I rewrote the whole Catholic Mass from a left-hand path perspective. Not so much like a black Mass, which is a little bit different, but going through it word for word, changing the words, changing the deities to the spirit you might be working with now, but using the format. So all you're doing is you're using the format, but you're adjusting everything else in accordance with your path that you're working now. Because psychologically, what that does, it breaks that. That's how you deprogram the programming, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you might hear rituals where, there's rituals where the person had to stomp on the Bible or burn the Bible. If you got to go to that length, I know it sounds crazy, but there's many different methodologies one can use for the deprogramming. Now, also, there's another class that I do on Patreon, is Esoterical Occult Bible Study. And this has helped. We go through the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelations, and understanding the history and origin of it will also deprogram you. Because when you find out that, look, the first 7 chapters of Genesis, that's the story of the Gilgamesh Epic and the Babylonian story of creation. That's in the Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis of the ancient Sumerians. And when you look at the story, for an example, of Noah, you see that in the story of Ut and the fish Tim. You see this story retold over and over. So it helps when the individual starts to understand, wait, that came from Egypt, that came from Samaria. Oh, so the Bible basically were mythological stories that the present day Bible writers took and just adjusted the names, the places, and they adjusted it to their culture. So I'm using that aspect. That's another form of deprogramming. Understanding the history and the genealogy of it, that helps. But carrying out ritual work is the most powerful form, because when you are, say, you are reforming, like, I don't care what it is, Seventh-day Adventist, whatever the central ritual or foundational practice, reform that ritual or that rite.
You know what I call that? I call that spiritual jujitsu, because you're not fighting against it no more. And that's genius, because you're taking it and you flipping it, though, for your own agenda, for your own evolution. Yeah, for real. Because I noticed when I first got on this path, Brother B, like, I was kind of on some Christianity shit. You know how it is. You first kind of get on this shit, and you feel like you got a chip on your shoulder, like you got something to prove. And you want to debate and do all that shit, stuff like that. but I have found
that rage and anger. You're angry.
Yeah. And then as you start to learn, I mean, there's still people walking around thinking the Bible is like a literal history book, and it may be history in some form or fashion, right? But like you said, it's taken from little pieces. Obviously, they edited it. So it is now one of the greatest mind control weapons. But we have that ability, like you said. See, because my grandma was Catholic. So I noticed Catholics have that ability to go to church. And when they come back, that church stuff kind of stays. I mean, yeah, they got the statues. They got all that. But like the other holy roller type Christians, that shit like ensconces your whole life. You know what I'm saying? Like everything.
Ask yourself this, Brother Shango. Ask yourself this, though. Here's the funny thing. Have you ever seen Catholics going door to door evangelizing?
No.
Do you ever see Catholics out on the, because when you look at it, like you look at the power that the Catholic Church has, the Vatican, when you look at power, wealth, stature, they're set in their ways. That's why they're not interested in converting anybody. Whereas all these more modern day movements like the Seventh-day Adventists, the Jehovah's, they're out there knocking door to door, running up to you, trying to give you leaflets.
They're marketing, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's a business, It's
different because, like you say, your relative, they would come home and they would leave that stuff there because it's on a whole different wavelength and spectrum. But go ahead. 100% agree with you.
Yeah, no, but I found that's just some of the things that you're going to, that those of you who want to join his shadow work class. And can you give me your Patreon? I was going to type it in. I only have two USB ports. So like I have to pick whether I want a camera and a mic or I want to have the mouse. So like it might make you sound with your Patreon.
It's just patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. Patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. Also, I know you know the YouTube channels, Primordial Chaos, 2 words. All the information and links to the Patreon and everything I'm telling you is on there. Primordial Chaos YouTube. There's also a Primordial Chaos 9 Instagram. That's where I post any classes, upcoming events, or anything going on.
I should have asked you for this. See, I'm learning. This is only my second show, so I'm learning. Yeah, I should have had this information that way. I could have.
No.
I could have had a ticker for you. You know what I'm saying?
It's all good.
Yeah.
So It's Primordial Chaos 9, all one word, no spaces on Instagram. And then there's also a pretty good following on the Facebook page, Primordial Chaos, 2 words. That's the best place to stay up. And I post all the Patreon classes on there. Now, I also let people, if you're not a full, you can sign up for individual classes without being a Patreon member. So that's why I gave you those links.
I'm going to tell you right now, folks, the best deal is to become a member, because
Tier 3,
especially Tier 3, because you also get to take advantage. He has different group rituals,
correct,
different things going on. And like the classes alone are fire. Like, I got to be a student again when I was in my dark time, Brother B. And I was like, I was excited because I love being a student. You know, I like to learn. I like to know that, you know, you're pressing the envelope. You know what I'm saying?
True,
but back to what you were saying, though, smacking up against that religious wall was one of the first and the hardest hurdles.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the thing that took me the longest to decompress from, or to, you know, deprogram myself from, because I would approach my magic from a religious motif, you know what I'm saying? And I sometimes it would be under my radar, underneath my nose. I didn't know I was doing it, you know?
Yes. And I'm glad you said that. Now, I came out of Catholicism as a young age, so that was easy because I was young, exploring. My struggle was I was into the whole Egyptian Kemetic thing for years. I was into all of that. But prior to that, it was Islam. So once I left Islam, then it was heavy into the whole Kemetic Egyptian thing. And it was tough. The left-hand path and the occult gave me a reality check that I realized, as you just said, even when I first started to realize there was still that religious motif syndrome that I was suffering from. And I was even in the early stages of my magic, I didn't realize till I had to do a check on it. I was doing the same thing you described. And one thing I keep telling people, you cannot bring those old ways of thinking into this path because it'll cause more conflict and confusion and struggle. So you can't try to match and here's the crazy thing, as you said earlier, sometimes you're doing it and you don't realize it. That's the
hardest part right there.
The hardest
when you
part.
Don't know that you don't know. That's the hardest part.
You hit it on the head. That's the struggle. But when it reveals itself later, then it's your responsibility to address it. So you may not have known at the moment, or it might have been going on for a period of time, but you will get at some point, the realization of it will reveal itself. And if you just ignore it at that point, then now it's on you. You can't.
Yeah.
It's on you.
Yeah, you're gonna come to that crossroads where you're gonna have to address it, but you have to know about it first. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah. But what I was saying though, what I found was genius was how you went and actually did the whole goddamn thing, the whole Latin shit, the whole shibitty bang. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that is using what used to oppress you, and now you're just flipping it. So I'm gonna bring up something like I heard you crack on it. It was funny to me because I actually shared the same point of view about Bible magic. He was like, man, you motherfuckers don't want to, you don't want to let that Christian shit go, do you? However, if you flip it in a certain way, like I guess you could say a more left-hand pathway, I have found, you know what I'm saying? Which to me, really, if you want to, I'm all about simplifying the spooky and grounding the magic, these spiritual concepts into practicality, right? So it means doing it your own fucking way for your own purpose. 100%. You know what I'm saying?
And I see the same thing with people say in Christianity and mainstream monotheism. But when I say monotheism, that applies to the 3 major monotheistic religions, which is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. But I see this same problem with a lot of Santeria practitioners coming from being in Santeria for that period that I was in it. I see people still can't let that go.
No, that's a big one. That's a big one.
And you hit it on the head. I show people you can still work with the Orishi or the Orisha, depending on how you pronounce it. You could still work Palo Mayembe minus all the traditional shit. Like, I still have my prendas. I still got my ganga pot. I still got my warriors. I still got my meje, right? But I don't need to feed my door every year and feed my Allegua every year. I can feed it in my own way. I've gotten more results working with my power and connection with it. And no disrespect to any of the elders that assisted me in my journey. And that's no disrespect to my godmother, who I still have a connection with. It's no disrespect to my godfather, my padrino in Palo Mayembe. But my thing is, you could still work with it as you described a few minutes ago in an occult left-hand pathway, minus the traditional stuff. Now, the traditionalists will say you're crazy. You can't do that. No way.
Of course.
Of course they're going to say that because they're still in that traditional mainframe.
Every time I go to before especially, I go into Botanicas and I might have some of my shit on, right? And who's your house? Who's your padrino?
Yeah,
who's your son? I'm like, man, I am basically shit. They couldn't understand that. So they wanted to either debate or, you get the funny vibes and shit like that. But I don't pay too much attention to that. But yeah, not being bound by tradition, because really when we talk about tradition, Brother B, are we not just talking about repeating the past over and over again, and we're not stepping into the new or the unknown?
That's one way to look at it. Tradition can be good and it could be bad.
Right.
It's bad in regards, yes, tradition can do what you just described. Mm-hmm. Tradition could be a good thing when it brings people together. It could bring growth. Tradition is good when it brings consistency into a person's spiritual practice, but it could become toxic when you're forcing others to or making it mandatory that they be part of that tradition. So tradition should always be optional. Right. I don't care what it is, because you're right. It's almost like it's just repeating the same thing over and over again. And that's the problem. Basically, you just summed it up in a nutshell. When you look at Christianity, for an example, regardless of what sect it is, even like the Catholics have what they call the liturgical calendar. And every really sect of Christianity uses, if you look at it and you go from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, really their beginning of the year starts at the end of the year. It starts with, Advent and Christmas, the birth of the Messiah, into ordinary time. Then it goes into where we're now, Lent and Easter, back into ordinary time. It's just the same cycle. You're reenacting. This is where tradition can be bad, because you're reenacting these traditional events over and over again, and nothing changes. Mm-hmm. That's basically the liturgical calendar of the church, and all the little holidays sandwiched in between. But it's precepted on the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus, spread out in 3 aspects of the year over a 12-month period. And
what I find funny is a lot of these Christian churches, they do not want to hear that their daddy is the Catholic Church. Like their daddy and mommy is the Catholic Church. And like, as much as sometimes they don't like, for whatever reason, it's like, if I'm not mistaken though, don't a piece of every church kind of go to the Catholic Church, even if you call yourself seven? I might be wrong on that, but that's something I'd heard. But I don't know if that's
from a perspective, yes. So first we have to establish this. This is very important. What does the word Catholic mean, right? The word Catholic is a Greek word that means universal. So when you're saying Catholic Church, you're saying the universal church. Now, the reason why you're right, it's the father or the daddy of all the churches, because whether you agree with it or not, the Catholic Church traces their roots back to the first pope, which was Peter, and which goes back to St. Peter or the Apostle Peter. I'm just giving you the history. I'm not saying I believe this. So let me make that clear. So, right. Yeah. So because it says in the Gospels that Christ said to Peter, he is the rock, and on that rock he would build his church, the Catholics ran with that. And they claim their first pope, who they say is Peter. Everyone from that point, the lineage of the pope to this day, can be traced with Peter. Now, there are some historical inconsistencies in there, but I'm just telling you what they say. So the first church here in the West, now we know the Orthodox, the original Orthodox church, or the Coptic church, which actually started in Northeast Africa or Egypt, and the word Coptic means center. They were your first real Christians, right? Because when you read in the book of Acts, chapter 11:26, it says that the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch, Syria. So this is why you have the Syriac Middle Eastern church, then the Greek Orthodox, and all those Eastern Orthodox churches came out of that, right? Which is the root of what we're calling the Catholic Church here in the West. Now, here's the deep thing. There's a word they've dropped from that over the years they don't use no more. Really, there's a word that goes in front of that. You might see it in some churches, but they've removed it I got my theory. Remember, it was the Roman Catholic
Yeah.
Church.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't use that word too much anymore because the Romans got all of those spiritual practices from all of those masters in the Northeast, in that region of Africa, Egypt, right? Because even when you study the whole Cleopatra and Mark Antony thing, we know the Greeks and the Romans went into Egypt and stole a lot of those writings from the Library of Alexandria, and they brought it back into Rome and Europe. When you look at the Roman Catholic Church, if you understand the science of it, it's very ritualistic because it incorporates paganistic Roman beliefs. It has Egyptian beliefs infused in it, along with Christianity. Because remember, the Roman Catholic Church was formed to give a religion at that time in Rome where they could still have an ancestral pagan religion, but also have a religion that appeased the masses. So when you really understand Roman Catholicism, it's an infusion of all of those practices. There's ancient Egypt. I always look at one. If you're an old school Catholic, you may or may not know this. There's the thing, I've mentioned this on previous videos. There's something they do in the Catholic Church. It's very ritualistic. It's called the exposition of the Blessed Sacrament. And what that is, for those that may not know as a Catholic, you might have seen this on TV, on one of those Catholic TV channels. It's something that they call a monstrous. And what the monstrous is, it looks like this big illuminated sun. It's this big gold artifact that has like a center base, and it has a big circular thing with rays. It looks like a sun. And in the center of it is a communion wafer.
Oh,
so
shit.
They peep this shit. Now you got the SUN sun, right?
Right.
And
you're
then
eating
you
the
have
sun.
the host, which they say the SUN in the center of it. So
Wow.
that's the thing that goes back to Egypt. And then you'll look at every Catholic altar. There's usually 3 steps. There's some masonry encoded in there. And what they do, they'll put this out, and people will come and meditate, say the rosary, pray. They expose it for X amount of time throughout a day. Most churches, if you look on your schedule, they have it laid out when they do it. And there's a ritual to open it when they put it out. And then there's a ritual at the end of the night when they close it to put it up back into the sanctuary. And if you see, every time the priest does it, when he handles it, there's a shawl or like a cape put over it, and he puts it around his hands. He can't touch it with his hands.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So Google. So what I'm saying is, I'm giving you, that's one of many ritualistic practices that predate Christianity. So back to your original question, it is the father or the daddy of all the churches, because every church branched out. Then this is where you have the Martin Luther, the Lutheran movement came out of that, the Episcopalian movement, right? Those were some of the first that basically Episcopalians are Catholics. They're just a little bit more liberal, right?
Yeah.
They don't really accept the Pope as divinity. And actually they do accept homosexuals into the priesthood. They're just a very more modern liberal form of Catholicism. Then the Protestant movement came out of that, et cetera. And then we have these more modern day, today, non-denominational, then some of these other movements that came way later, like the Seventh-day Adventists, the Jehovah's Witnesses, but you hit it on the head. I always tell people that say they're Christian, I say this to be as a joke to wake them up, but to tell them the truth. You belong to a cult if you're a Christian and you're not in the Catholic Church.
Yep.
Bottom line.
Yep.
They may not
just
look
like
at
the
it.
babies. The babies are the Jehovah's Witness. They're in the whole scope of things.
Yeah.
Like the babies,
They're
the
the
Mormons.
new kids on the block.
Yeah, the new kids on the block. So I would like to know if you can. There's something that you had shared. I think you've shared this a few times, but I'd like you to be able to share it with the audience as far as just something practical that they can do. I personally term it the mirror technique, but I think you know where I'm going with this. So could you share something that people could maybe just start with before they join the class or as they're joining the class or whatnot? But this mirror technique that you know what I speak of, Brother B.
Yeah, no, definitely. We could talk about that.
Yeah.
Mirror, working with mirrors, self-realization rites have always been a powerful practice that's been used for centuries. It opens the person up to a certain awareness. So one of the things we do in the shadow work class is a self-realization rite. Now, I'll give it to you a simple way you can do this.
I'm talking about the butt naked.
Yeah. There's 2 ways you can do this. First, the first one with the mirror that Brother Shango is referring to, as funny as it may sound, it is kind of funny, but it's very powerful.
It's very powerful.
First thing it's about is most people struggle because they don't really fully love themselves, right? I always tell people to start there. And I don't want to say that to sound like some fluffy motivational speaker, but we all
Stuart Smalley.
Yeah, Stuart Smalley. I am somebody. Remember
I'm
that?
somebody. I'm worth it. Damn it.
I am worth it. And damn it, I'm special. That's what Saturday Night Live was.
Was live. Yeah.
But there's a lot of self-hate on a subconscious level we are been avoiding about ourselves. Mm-hmm. And you see it in the world because when you look at media, movies, entertainment, celebrities, everybody's talking about keeping it real, but everybody's fake as shit from head to toe. Fake eyelashes, fake nails, fake.
And
butts.
you know what? I was having this conversation, not to cut you off, but the reason there is an epidemic in fake fuckery, it came to me is that you're looking at a bunch of scared motherfuckers. They're scared to show who they really are. You know what I'm saying? Right. And they, like you said, they may not even like who they really are, truth be told, you know, or hate themselves, you know, but continue.
Correct. Yeah. Look, no, that's an excellent point. I'm glad you said that. I mean, just think about this. Look, I don't knock anybody that has any, I just want to make this clear because sometimes people get up in their feelings about this, especially in regards to women who have fake hair, fake nails, fake eyelashes, weavy wonders, bleaching their skin, getting butt shots, lip shots,
risking their life with that, a lot of that shit, the butt shots and stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
look, what does that say about you? Now, I've heard every justification for it. Oh, I don't do it for that. There is some form of self-hate there. I don't give a shit. You can use any excuse and justification you want for it. At some level or degree, if you are honest with yourself, there is some form of self-hate. What do I mean? A lot of people, and that goes back to the question too you asked earlier about wants and needs. A lot of people chase things in their life. They spend their whole life chasing things that are unimportant. Right. So my thing is the mirror ritual, just standing in front of the mirror, bucket naked, and studying yourself. A lot of emotions come to the surface because there's a lot of people in life who are not happy with their body type, not happy with their skin.
That's a huge one. That's like a huge one. Yeah.
You may not like your nose, your lips, your butt, your titties, your skin tone. You may not like where your arms are shaped, your legs, and rightfully so. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying don't strive to better yourself, but there's natural things you can do to fix that, right? You don't necessarily got to go get plastic surgery. How about getting into a fucking gym and maybe exercising and eating a little better? I struggle with this. Shit, we all do. To a degree, you could exercise 4 and 5 times a week and still struggle with that stuff.
Yeah.
So step one is that the ritual, the little not really a ritual, but the exercise you were talking about in the shadow work class. I tell people, stand in front of the mirror, bucket naked, and study yourself from head to toe. Mm-hmm. And what will happen is as you gaze at yourself and look at yourself in the eyes and start from the top of your head, your forehead, your nose, your lips, your entire body, all the way to your feet, you will have an influx of emotions, happiness, sadness, joy. And sometimes you'll laugh at yourself because you'll realize how, when the reality kicks in of all that, how comical but emotional it is at the same time. Mm-hmm. But you have to learn to love every aspect of yourself. I don't care if your nose is long, thin, broad, same thing with your lips. You have to be able to embrace and love every part of yourself first before you can really proceed further to deeper parts of shadow work.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to show people we don't leave no stone unturned. We start from the very basic and we work our way because that has to be addressed. Mm-hmm. So I tell people, again, without sounding like Stuart Smalley,
it's real though.
Yeah. Do you really love yourself?
Yeah.
Right. Look, it takes a lot of self-reflection. I'm at the point I'm good with it. Right. I mean,
I was just going to say, you could truly love yourself and people. So you don't have to, you could truly love yourself and just be like, hey, but I would like to, improve this or that. You know what I'm saying? Like he just said, it's not about, but there is a level of acceptance where, hey, this is where I'm at now. And whether I was to improve it or not, I'm good with me. You know what I'm saying? Like you were saying, wants and needs. This is one thing that I get a lot as far as clients, like, yeah, you want a relationship, but you may need to be by your fucking self for a bit. You know what I'm saying? Get to know yourself, you know,
100%.
or,
Well,
you know,
in regards to that and shadow work, I want to address that. That's in the journaling process because the journaling process asks the tough questions. And what you just said, you're going to find the people who don't or be with themselves to get to know themselves, they usually suffer from serious levels of insecurity and fears. And they usually have a history of going from one bad relationship right into the next.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh my God. It's
the same person with a different face, basically, is what it is.
Because of what you just said. They don't take that time.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you come out of something that was so toxic and negative, the worst thing you want to do is go jump right back into something else.
Yeah.
That is just a recipe.
I was just saying that that whole get up under somebody to get over somebody shit don't work. It doesn't work at all. You're actually compounding, you know,
that's correct,
the real issues and stuff like that. Okay, so I know you got a busy schedule here, and I wanted to just address one last thing. It's this is something you were speaking on with Chaos Magic, which is like my shit, you know, because Chaos Magic you can be and do anything pretty much. You know what I'm saying?
Very eclectic.
Yes, very eclectic. But can you speak about the impact of shadow work, right? Dealing with the unconscious and the concept of accomplishing more unconsciously without you.
Okay, so the best way I describe it, and it's funny you bring this up because we were having a discussion about this a few days ago. There's a saying called "do without doing," and a lot of people, you see this in Hermeticism, alchemy. Most people don't really understand what that means. Now, do without doing doesn't mean, oh, I'm just going to sit back, not do anything, and things are just going to start happening. When you mention things happening on an unconscious level, the goal is how can you perform magic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop? So now you hear that and you go, that sounds completely unrealistic, bizarre, and there's no fucking possible way that can happen. Yes, there is. Once you start to train the subconscious mind where you're constantly fueling your intent 24/7, not just consciously, but unconsciously. So the goal is once you stamp that in your subconscious mind, it's being fueled even when you're going about your day on a mundane level, on a conscious level, doing just the things you do on a daily basis. But on a subconscious level, you're still fueling your intent for all your goals and all you're trying to accomplish. Now, let me explain this. It's going to be hard to explain this, but I'm going to try my best.
Land that plane. Do it.
if I'm working, running my business, doing an activity, out and about, running errands, my mind immediately has been conditioned where I can go in and out. Even I'm aware to a degree that my thoughts are still fueling that intent, and I might dip out of that, go about handling a task or doing something, but there's still this awareness. Even when I think I'm not aware, I still am aware. It's the best way I can put it in words.
You know what? I look at, you just brought something up to me. If somebody can fuck theyself unconsciously, why can't you, empower yourself and be working your magic unconsciously? 100%. You know what I mean? And the shadow work aspect is going to kind of root out those unconscious things that are getting in your way, so that way you can do this more effectively, right? So I gave out your email too. It's KHNUM. It's in the chat if you're watching this. I'm gonna put this information also in the comment section of this video afterwards. But yeah. So when you were talking about that though, once again, it's funny because I consider a lot of this or much of this information to be alive. You hear it from one level of mind, you get certain ahas, you circle back to it in the spiral, and then you hear it again, and it's like you hear it in a different way. You know what I'm saying? It comes alive a whole other way.
So and I'm glad so what I was trying to just explain, the goal is to absorb it and let it become part of every aspect of your DNA. That's what I was trying to say. Okay. We're trying to simplify it. So when what you just described, once you could take the very essence of that, absorb it into every aspect of your existence or your DNA, that's when it starts to work on the unconscious level. That's when it goes to a whole nother level. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie. I know we're explaining it in words and it sounds, that sounds so easy, snack, crackle, pop. It's not. I don't want to paint the picture for anybody that the way we're making it sound is very simple. It comes over time, discipline, consistency in your work, and patience with yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to paint the picture, even though me and you just described that like, oh man, they just said that like it was a walk in the park. It's not. I'm not going to lie to you.
That's why I wanted you to talk about that, because to me that's like the heads of it. The tails of it is kind of like the shadow work, because if you don't do the shadow work, you're going to keep perpetuating shit unconsciously, and you don't even know what's in there. You know what I'm 100%. Saying? So
look, I always tell people, and you know this, I always start teaching a student the 3 foundational pillars to being successful on this path. And in my opinion, it is my opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but I can tell you a lot of practitioners will be in alignment of what I'm about to say. And I know, we could touch on that maybe on a future topic.
Yeah.
But one of those pillars that's connected to it's shadow work first.
Yeah.
Demonic integration work right after that. And then ancestral work.
Why you think I got the tiger, Brother B? You know what I'm saying? Like, and I got that through your shadow work class. Like I was able to, and since then, I mean, I've been able to connect with my inner Damon beforehand, but after doing that one particular ritual, which I'm not going to say here, you got to take the class, folks. You know what I'm saying? Take the class. Now I know you do cycles of class, right?
Yes.
Also, okay. Are you in a particular part of a cycle now, or is there a new cycle coming up?
Good question. So we have ongoing cycle of classes and we just rotate them. So for an example, we have ongoing series. At first I was doing that, but I said, you know what? I'm just going to number them and we can just keep rotating them and going back to them. But in the numerical sequence, it just lets the person know. So for an example.
So they can backtrack also if they join today.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So as you know, we're getting ready to do shadow work class number 16 in April. So there's 15 shadow work classes. We have 8 or 9 African witchcraft and sorcery classes. We're up to 5 or 6 in Luciferian magic and self-mastery. The Kundalini meditation and yoga class, we're up to about 6 or 7 of those, etc. So basically there's ongoing cycles, but we just rotate them. It's not like we pick this one and put a time frame on it. We kind of just pick 3 a month. We're going to do these 3 classes. And then the following month, we pick another 3 different ones. And we kind of just keep rotating that cycle. That's and smart. In between, as you see, I add new ones here and there. It's just so much to cover on this path. I try to do it in a way. When I first started out, I'd go into these, because you know me, some of my classes could be 5 and 6 hours. But I found out that could be overkill. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
So I kind of cut the classes a little more in half. I try to keep them to 2.5, 3 hours max, because I want to make sure you absorb the information. Yeah, it's nice. People go look at a video. Oh shit, 5 or 6 hours. But really, when it comes, I'm not talking like a YouTube video or something like we're doing. We could kick it. Because that's different. But when you're doing it as something in a class format,
you're teaching,
yes, you want to make sure the student is absorbing it. So if I'm doing a 5-6 hour class for a student, I had to go back and analyze. I said, yeah, it's a lot of information, but then I had to ask myself, but really, how much of it are they really retaining? So this is why I came up with the cycles in the series, rather than just talk about a bunch of different things in one 5, 6, 7 hour class. Let me create specific classes where we'll take 2.5, 3 hours to focus on key components of that spiritual system. So yes,
and then that's also where you get your homework, because that's where the rubber hits the road. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Folks out there, like when you're doing the work, the journaling, stuff like that, that's where the magic happens.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So we just rotate the classes. It's not cycles as far as time frames. It's just cycles of constant rotation of these ongoing series. That's all.
Well, if there's any questions in the chat too, I mean, feel free, anybody out there, to put your questions for Brother Baniti. We're having a great conversation here. I hope, and I'm positive that your concept of shadow work has been, illuminated to different perceptions with this conversation, because, I like getting different, people's point of views. And one thing about his Patreon too, as a magician myself, as a sorcerer, like I get inspired by other people's work. I like hearing what other people are doing. It's like, it's inspiring to me. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. I always encourage people, check everybody out,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to books,
Right.
right? Don't get infatuated with one particular thing because you stifle your growth.
Mhm.
Like, for an example, if you study Luciferian practice, there's different aspects and perspectives on Luciferianism. There's some who are more focused on attacking the antithesis of the religious aspect.
Mhm.
There's some who get in more of an esoterical, like Richard K. Page is a great author. I like his approach to Luciferian practice and philosophy because it's very vast, it's open.
Mhm.
Thomas Alvarez, he gets more into, you could tell he was scarred a lot by Christianity and religion. So he uses the Luciferian philosophy to deprogram the religious stuff we were talking about earlier.
Right. Right.
So I'm just using that as an example.
Mhm.
Always don't get caught up in one particular thing. I also see sometimes people, they might fall in love with a particular aspect of this path and then they get stuck like Chuck. Be careful of that because all of those things are you and you're all those things. You don't need to make a declaration that I'm a practicing Luciferian to study in Luciferian philosophy.
Hey, people love their labels. You know what
They
I'm
love their
saying?
labels. See, I don't label myself any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Don't do that to yourself
Yeah.
because you can't be a god or a goddess if you're putting a label on yourself, is what I'm trying
The
to.
moment you do, you limit it.
Yeah.
You confine it. So I totally agree with that, and that's what we
Yeah.
were talking about. Chaos magic is the beauty of, like, I heard you speaking on it. One day you might wake up and be like, hey, I want to fuck with my kimbanda today,
That's it.
and then tomorrow it's Santissima Muerte,
Next day, I
and
want to do some Lilith Samael work and work on the clip hop.
yeah.
See, the most precious gift that we have on this path is more precious. And I don't want to sound philosophical, but it's more precious than money, than anything in the world. We have the liberty and the freedom. We could wake up every day and be whatever the fuck we want to be.
Yep.
And I wouldn't trade that in for nothing. And we're not obligated. And as we were talking about earlier, the programming, and when in reference to shadow work, the religious programming, we don't have guilt, regret, fear. I don't feel binded and obligated to shit because of what you just said.
Right.
I might want to get up tomorrow and do some work with Oshun in my own way.
Right.
And then I might want to, like you say, get up next week and I'm feeling the Egyptian Heka vibe. I want to start this week. I just feel the vibe to work with the Egyptian deities. All right. I got out of that. All of a sudden I get up tomorrow. I want to start working, with Samael or Lucifer.
Right.
Because when that's happening, that's a sign that you're truly liberated. That's why I'm saying it's not.
I notice a lot of people get stuck in like you're saying, maybe they get stuck in the comedic. I heard one of your viewers, he called them is golden. He called them hematites, or I noticed that people, I see certain occultists on here, and everything that comes out of their mouth is like, for example, all the shit that Bobby Hemmett said. Like, yeah, we done heard that already. Like they just fucking repeat. They're like parrots. They're doing a book report. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
let me speak on that. I'm glad you said that. Yes, look, I have respect for the elders. I never
absolutely
ever disrespect Bobby Hemmett. I have spoken out against the Bobby Hemmett where they put him in a place that he never put himself in.
He didn't want to be in that shit. He would always say, don't follow me. Like, do your own thing,
Do your own thing. So I want to make that clear. I have the ultimate respect for Bobby Hemmett. I have the ultimate respect for Phil Valentine, even though I may not be Phil. I've had Phil Valentine on some of my old shows. I had the ultimate respect for Dr. Delbert Blair, who passed a few years ago. He was actually, I consider him one of my mentors in the earlier days. I had a lot of private conversations with him, and he taught me a lot. And Dr. Delbert Blair was into a lot more darker stuff than he talked about on the surface. He actually taught me a lot about mirror magic. So there was a lot of things that Dr. Delbert Blair didn't maybe not talked about openly. But anyway, to your point, what I'm saying I find in this occult thing, there are a lot of Bobby Hemmetites, if that's what you want to call them. And they think that because they indulged in a little Bobby Hemmett's teaching that's left-hand path. Now, Bobby Hemmett taught on some left-hand path things, but he never laid claim to being a full left-hand path practitioner. You can't find him saying that anywhere. Yeah, I know he talked about Lucifer and Satan, but he like there's stuff with Bobby Hemmett I respectfully disagree with. Like there's a video he taught years back on Alois, which was Crowley's holy guardian angel. And he said in that class, Alois was a black man on a spaceship headed back to Earth to save black people. I don't agree with that. That to me is personal. That's I'm not knocking it.
I think also too, like when you see somebody over the years, right, and they may seem to contradict themselves. To me, that's an indication of growth. That means that you're not saying the same shit dogmatically. I think that's part of the problem is nowadays, especially with this TikTok shit and all this other shit, like people will just latch on to something that somebody said, and then they start spouting it like it's the gospel, and they have no, like they haven't even probably applied the shit or had their own experience with it, and they're just.
How many YouTube channels have you come across where you saw that? You flip
a fuckload of them.
They just regurgitating shit
all the fucking
that
time.
They heard Bobby Hemmett, but they swear they're saying something deep.
Exactly.
And see, it's something I talked about for years going back. I say the problem a lot of people have in a lot of these conscious movements and spiritual paths, we have a disease called back in the day itis, right? We have another disease called messiah-itis. And why I call it that is this. Everybody either wants to get stuck back in the day with stuff that you're saying, or we want to live about back in the day. We used to be kings and queens, and we were this and we were that. And I always put I dead that conversation with, you know what? That shit is pointless, because how can I take that greatness and bring it into 2023? Because sitting here talking about how great we used to be is not putting any money into my pocket. It's not making me live my best life. And
or even better now, like talking about all this shit that is more conceptual that can't be confirmed or denied. How does that help my immediate circumstances right now?
It doesn't.
What can I do with that? You know what I'm saying? Right.
And that's what sometimes people get stuck. And if it's not that, the other thing it is, then we have the messiah-itis complex, where unfortunately a lot of people in these groups or movements, they're just as guilty as the Christians, because they want to look up to somebody as some type of savior or messiah figure. So the sad thing is some of these elders we're talking about, and this is facts, and it might piss some people off, they almost look at some of these teachers as Jesus type characters. Like, I want somebody, it's easier for me to look to somebody else for my salvation and take me to the promised land. Then I ain't got to do no work myself. I'm part of it. I'm down. I got my ticket, and everything's gonna work out for me. That's the other complex that it's hard to shed. Yeah, and that's the reality. This is why a lot of those cult movements were successful for years. Whether it's the Dr. York movement, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, David Koresh, because it preys upon people who have that weak mindset. It sells to those people.
And circling back to shadow work, with shadow work, you can exorcise them demons of, what is it, learned helplessness, hashata basoto. You know what I mean? Like, you can get that shit up out of here, because that's really what that is. There's an unconscious element of what did I just say? Learned helplessness. Or you feel like you can't, at a deep level, you feel like you can't actually fucking help yourself. So you're looking outside to this person, that person, dogmatically just agreeing with people, shit like that. You know what I'm saying?
In relation to shadow work, why a lot of people go into cults like that, they usually in their life, there was a lack of presence of a father figure, right? Yeah. So sometimes it feeds the need. They look at like a charismatic cult leader or some group or some organization could be providing something that they didn't get or lacked as a child. And like you say, shadow work will answer that. Yeah. Maybe you belong to the cult because you're getting that daddy energy that you didn't get because maybe your father was not a good father. Maybe he was an absent father or wasn't a father who participated and supported you in your life, etc. Right. So they go somewhere else and try to fill that void or that need. Yes. And shadow work will definitely show you that. I've seen people who were part of churches or organizations or movements who came to the realization in their shadow work, oh shit, I'm using this to mask an insecurity that I'm struggling with. So yeah, I mean, that shadow work is going to be layered and hidden all up in there. It's just,
and it should be said too, folks out there, the shit never ends. So
never.
it's not like you're never going to have a moment where you're like arrive like I don't have to do shadow work no more.
It
Like
doesn't
you know, like
exist.
yeah, not while you're in a meat suit, and maybe even beyond. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
But
the bottom line is this: the reason why shadow work never ends is because things are constantly changing in your life on a daily basis.
mhm.
So the beauty of it is, though, here's the good news for people. Yes, out the gate, I'm not going to lie, it's a challenge when you first jump in. Then them first few stages is rough.
Especially when you're out of homeostasis of what you're used to,
Yes.
right? Because you're getting out of that box or that prison, so it's like it's going to feel unfamiliar, and a lot of
Yes.
times it's like it is hard. Continue. Sorry about that.
No. But here's the good news to everybody. Once you get it flowing consistently and you're doing it, and that harmony starts to kick in, the maintenance work becomes a little easier.
Absolutely.
And the maintenance work is, as I said a minute ago, it never ends because your life is constantly changing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when you get yourself working to a level where it's flowing consistently, the maintenance work becomes a bit easier. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
So I don't want to paint the picture that it's easy, but I don't want to paint the picture that it's just all gloom and doom either.
I used to be a janitor, right? So like when we would do a new building, that first clean that we had to do, I mean, I'm talking every crevice, every fucking crack.
Fucking worst.
That shit was the worst, right? But after that, to maintain it, usually, unless depending on the location, obviously, but to maintain it though was like it's just like with your house. You know, if you do a really deep cleaning in your house and then you just maintain it. And when speaking to what you're saying about maintaining, and I want to say this to the people out there: when you're doing shadow work, you can expect to also still be triggered by some of the same shit you've been working on.
Yes.
But don't get vexed about it, because you're going to notice that it doesn't take you there anymore. Like its effects and its hold on you get lesser and lesser and lesser. So you know that's a part of the process that that he was speaking.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because you're gonna start to realize. Let me give you an example. I'm so glad you brought that up right there. Let's just say you're working on a habit that you're struggling with, or maybe you overreact to certain things that like you say triggers or creates that habit. This is how you know it's working and you're getting the results. Let's just say that moment, like you're talking about, triggers you. And then all of a sudden this inner voice clicks in with this wise words of wisdom, like, no, hold on, man. Slow down, pause, take a deep breath. That's how you know it's working. Like you say, something will kick in where you'll see it doesn't take you from 0 to 100 like it used to. Right. But you bring up an excellent point. Don't mislead yourself and think there won't be moments where some of those same things you're working on, that some of those triggers will, it'll happen. I'm glad you bring it up, because I always want to, and I've said this from day one with this path across the board, don't let anybody bullshit you. It's work. Yeah. There's no such thing as lighting a few candles, doing a few spells, saying a few invocations, and your life's going to be fixed. Yeah. If you believe that, you're a complete fucking idiot. I'm sorry. It's the only way I can put it. It just doesn't work like that. If it was that fucking easy, me and you wouldn't be sitting
here. We'd all did it. Yeah, we'd be on to the next.
We wouldn't even be here. Nobody would be here.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is, there are people out there on YouTube and social media who sometimes present it like that. Yeah. And then what happens is people go get somebody to do something and nothing happens because they didn't have a real good understanding. Even when you're doing spell work or ritual work, sometimes you got to stay at it for an extended amount of time. It don't mean you just do it one and done. I love people who reach out to me and go, I was doing this work, man, it failed, it didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And I say, oh, wow, sorry to hear that. So tell me what you did. And then they tell me and they did one thing. I'm like, that's it?
Yeah.
No, that's not.
I mean, sometimes certain situations or certain things maybe can be one and done. Like I'm sure you had experience. Yeah. But like you said, in general, though, don't be surprised is the point if you need to be more consistent with your work on something. You know what I mean? Because that whole one and done microwave mentality shit. You know what I'm saying?
You know what that lines over? There's something my father used to say years ago, like when something was broke, I'd say, Pop, this is broke. It's not working. And my father would say, is it actually broke or is it the person that's using it? Think about that for a minute.
Right. Yeah.
Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
That's so true. And sometimes it's like that with magic. It's not that the magic isn't working. Maybe it's the person performing the magic that just isn't working effectively. I would say that's probably 99.9999% that. Yeah.
Other than that, it may be just the wrong choice of tool for the wrong situation, as I was speaking on yesterday. But yeah, when you come from the perspective that you are the magic, you know, so you technically are the altar. Yep. You technically are all of those ritual tools. Yeah.
See, the thing people have to understand is, yes, I'm a big, firm supporter, and I think everybody should have their own personal ritual and spiritual place, no doubt. I believe you should have your altar, your working tools, etc. But I also believe you should be able to have your own astral temple. People don't understand what the fuck that is.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You got to be able to work magic any place at any time, where you can tap into the astral realm and through your visualization skill. I'm showing people now how you create an astral altar in the astral realm and can go there anytime you feel, in any place, no matter where you're at. And you could work a ritual in the power of your mind and carry it out. And
I'm glad you brought that up, Brother B. We're in sync, Brother B. That's one of the things I'm also teaching in my Master Your Magic workshop. I got coming up this because it's all about the fundamentals and things. Yeah. So that's another one. As far as besides a magic persona, it's also, like he said, a magic temple or a magic palace, whatever you want to call it. But somewhere in your mind that you go, and also being able to kind of fuse your mundane reality with that astral reality too. You know 100%. What I'm saying? Like,
you just that is important. And remember, you asked a question a little earlier. How do you keep that, when we were talking about keeping that magic fueled and that intent fueled on an unconscious level?
Right.
That ties into that. And that's a difficult skill. I'm going to tell you, that takes a lot of practice. It's not something, and I want to make this clear, maybe there's other seasoned practitioners listening and have that ability, and I'm sure there's many that do. But to maybe a newer person listening and watching this show or catching the recording of it, I want to make it clear. It takes a buildup to get to that point. That's not something.
That's a process.
I just want to make it clear. And that's why taking like a workshop you're doing or classes and really learning and studying about it is going to build you up to that. Now, again, that don't apply to seasoned practitioners that know how to do it. But I want to, again, I'm speaking briefly to maybe newer people on the path. That's not going to come right out the gate. I can tell you that. No. But you should get yourself to that point, because it's a very useful tool, because sometimes you might have to work magic in the moment right there.
On the fly. That's some of my best shit is on the fly. I was just saying that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
you don't have time to go to the altar and do the whole setup.
And you know what else, Brother B? You don't have time to think about it. You just do. There's that unconscious. Well, listen, we're gonna wrap up because I think my battery's gonna die. I have to unplug my laptop because there's gonna be a wicked hum if I don't. So
no worries. Sounds good.
Yeah. So hopefully we can have you back again. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure everybody here did. Once again, you're going to find his information in this chat. You can reach out to. He also does readings too. All kinds of readings, shadow work readings, demonic readings. Like, I mean, he can let you
Day readings, deity readings. Yeah, everything is on those links to those page. Everything.
You can hit him up at Here's his email right here. So we're going to get up out of here. Thank you once again, Brother B.
Brother. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Appreciate your work, bro. Stay up. All right, everybody. Have a good night. We're out of here.